All right, let's go ahead and get started. Today's going to be all about looking at the methods section, excuse me. Yeah, most of this should be review once again if you've taken 203. Yeah, so let's jump into it. So first off, does anyone have any questions about assignment number 7? I extended the due date to tomorrow at midnight. So you have a little bit extra time with that. First off, does anyone have any questions about assignment 7, submitting it, or what goes in an introduction? Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know. Please let me know actually by 5 p.m. today, because that's the last time I'll be able to answer any questions about the introduction. So let me just throw a question out to the class. What did you find easier? Was there anything easier, or was there anything harder than doing it last semester?
Wait, I have something.
Okay.
I think having like upwards of 8 to 10 resources made it like a little bit more harder. Because like last time we only had to have like 6. So like putting the extra few more in there is a little bit tough.
Yeah. What group? What is group 1? Let me just think. Okay. Yeah. So your group is doing attractiveness and perceived intelligence, correct? Yeah. So, and I think one of the themes that you're talking about is maybe not even maybe it's not it's borderline discrimination based on looks, kind of. I mean, you're not really looking at discrimination, but one of the things. So one of the things I would suggest for all groups, and I kind of brought this up last class, was broadening your search terms, I guess. Try to think about not the main idea, but a big picture concept of what you're looking at. So, you may be looking, something else that your group could look for is discrimination based on looks, right? Potentially there could be some literature out there, not exactly what you're looking at, right? You're not looking at discrimination per se, but you are, that research may support some of the things you're doing, and you'd be able to use that in your introduction because you're showing how, attractiveness influences other things. And I suggest other groups to take a step back. If you're having trouble finding research, take a step back and look at what you're actually investigating. For people who are doing like the social media likes amount, like a positive and a negative situation on social media and stress, take a step back and look at just, how social media influences well-being or how social media influences stress. You don't have, don't be too specific in your search history because you're not really going to find a lot. This is similar to this little exercise we did last class with the fidget spinner, right? You're not going to find a lot of research looking at fidget spinners and how it influences memory recall or just memory in general, but you can look at other distractions, auditory distractions, visual distractions, and how that influences recall of memory. So take a step back and look at your project in a big picture kind of way. And I think that may help some people search for research. Because you're right, finding research can be hard. Writing an introduction is not the easiest thing in a paper, right? In my opinion, it can be one of the hardest depending on what topic you're doing, because as we'll learn today, or I guess relearn, because we should already know this, but the methods section really shouldn't be that hard, right? As a preset standard thing that you have to do. Everyone's methods it's going to look slightly different, but it has the same flow. Introductions are hard. But yeah, if you're having trouble finding research, take a step back and look at your big picture idea for your project, and hopefully you should find some more research. Did anyone have anything else that they, problems that they were having that I might be able to address?
Are we able to share our sources with people in our group?
Yeah, I would encourage it. You definitely share your 3 sources that you found for one of the prior assignments. But if you have a research article that you think your group, would benefit by, share it. Now, that being said, obviously write it in your own words, incorporate it into your introduction in your own words, but there's no problem sharing resources. All right, if anyone has any more, some people may have specific questions that are specific to their own introduction. Please let me know once again by 5 p.m. I have office hours from 4 to 5. Please stop in then. All right, so today we're going to be doing an overview of the methods. We're also going to be talking about assignment number 8, which is the methods draft. Hopefully it's a little bit easier than the intro draft, but we'll get into it. We're going to have another writing workshop thing that we're going to speed through at the end of class. You're going to have about 15-20 minutes to work together as groups, to work together in groups on drafting the procedure section for your methods section. Also project work. Okay, so several groups have been approved to start collecting data. I'm still waiting on a response back from group number, I believe, 1. Yeah, group number 1. Please respond back by leaving comments on that feedback sheet I sent you. Do that ASAP. We need to start collecting data. Anyways, I've been emailing 1 or 2 groups. Just please get back to me. Even though I just sent one of the groups an email. Anyways, so once you get to final approval, you can go ahead and start collecting data. You'll have 2 weeks to collect 100 participants. Apparently, last semester in 204, all they really needed was a week. So 2 weeks should be plenty of time. Before March 25th, I'm going to be sending out a when to meet, so that way we can meet as a group again. During this meeting, which will happen most likely not next week, but the week after that, we're just going to download your data, look at it, make sure everything is okay. I've already kind of done this when I was going through your assignment number 6. I downloaded the data myself, and whenever I made changes, I made sure everything was going okay. But we can talk about your data. Some groups are going to have to manually calculate some scores within SPSS. We did that last semester, but I could do a quick refresher for those groups. Anyways, I'll send out a when to meet and more instructions, but we're all going to meet as a group to discuss your data. All right, let's move on. So like I said, today we're going to be talking about the methods section. Well, what is it? It describes exactly how the study was conducted and what materials were used. So why do we do it? Kind of 2 main reasons. Helps with validity and it helps with replication. So validity, it allows readers, most likely going to be other researchers, to assess how valid your study is. How valid were the measures, right? Did you just randomly come up with some measures that make no sense? Now, that was, most groups did come up with their own dependent variable and questions to assess their dependent variable. But typically in a published paper, right, you wouldn't just willy-nilly ask some random questions without first either validating those questions in some pilot testing, or you would most likely just use other materials that other researchers have used. And also the internal validity of the study. So how well your study was managed, right? Are there any other possible explanations, maybe some confounding errors or confounding problems that happened of how you designed and ran your study? Well, if you have a well-written methods section, or a well-written design and procedure, other researchers are going to be able to read through and say, oh, everything looks okay, or wait, here's a flaw, let's address it in a follow-up study. Replication. So we need to provide a sufficient amount of detail about the methodology to allow replication by other researchers. This is really important because most psychological research is built off of a previous study, right? I'll read a previous study and I'll say, you know what? I don't really believe their findings, or I think their findings can be explained by something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to design a study, and the first part of the study is going to replicate their findings, and the second part of the study is going to be me adding something new. So as a researcher, when you're writing a paper, you need to provide enough detail. That way other people can replicate your study. But the general rule, only include enough information to replicate the study, but no more. So I think last semester we were talking about, like, do we care if they're using a Mac or a PC? Probably not, right? Unless your study is looking at maybe the personality of those 2 different types of users, but you probably don't care what computer they're using it on. Do we care if they use a pen or a pencil? Probably not, right? But we do care about other things, and we need to be specific in how we write it so that way other researchers can to replicate the study. Last semester, I don't, if you had me, I did that little example with making a grilled cheese. If you're not specific enough, making a grilled cheese can go really wrong, right? You can have something that looks nothing like grilled cheese. So you need to provide a lot of good detail. So hopefully this is all review, but what makes up the methods section? Well, of course, we should have a paragraph or two on participants, paragraph or two on materials and the stimuli, probably 2 paragraphs, one for your IV and one for your DV, right? Paragraph or two on the design and procedure, and finally a short paragraph on data analysis. So let's jump into it and actually look at what goes into each of these sections. So participants, right? What goes in this? Well, we talk about our participants. So we talk about who participated in our study. Typically at a very base level, we're going to provide how many number of participants, right? We should have a sample of X amount of participants. Well, we will also most likely give a percentage of male and female. What else? Someone else throw out, what else should be in the participant section? What other stat would you like to see in it?
Maybe how like, oh, sorry. Maybe how like the participants were recruited.
Yeah. So this could go in 1 or 2 sections. You might want to just briefly mention, you might want to say we're recruited online, and then you can get a little bit more specific in your design and procedure perhaps. But yeah, you could definitely say, how are they recruited? I think all of yours are going to be recruited online. I don't think any group is limiting it to West Virginia students. But if you think back to last semester, in 203, it was a convenient sample of West Virginia University students taking Psych 203. You probably don't want to write that sentence for this one because you aren't using a convenient sample from Psych 203 students. So you're going to have to slightly change it. But yeah, you can talk a little bit about how they recruited, but that might want to go in a future section. What else?
I had said ethnicity.
Oh, ethnicity. Yeah, that's another one that you can report. I do know that some groups, in my feedback, I said, oh, if you're not actually going to look at ethnicity, maybe you want to take it off. But then I sent a follow-up email saying, hey, actually, it makes sense. I was thinking about it. It definitely, even though you might not use any analyses with it, you can throw it in the demographics. It's good to have. So I think I caught everyone that I said to take out ethnicity. But this is just also just a blanket. If you have not included ethnicity in your study, go ahead and throw it in. Is there anything else that people can think of to assess potentially in your demographics, whether or not you assessed it in your own demographics? Yes, Kylie?
Did anyone say age yet? Did we say age?
I'm not sure, but yeah, that's a good one. Age, some groups are limiting their age range, but yeah, another thing to talk about, age, mean and standard deviation, of age. Some other things to throw in here are, in this paragraph, are reasons for participation, right? So last semester, I believe you had a sentence or two stating something along the lines of, participants had to do it because they were in Psych 203 and they did it for credit for the class, right? So maybe if you were using SONA, which we're not, but you could say participants were given 2 points extra credit in one of their classes. But for all of you, I'm assuming none of you are providing incentives, or rather you should not be providing incentives. I hope you're not paying your participants. Maybe you're made of money, I don't know. But, one of the things you could say are, maybe there were no incentives. It was just put online and people were asked to participate, right? If there's any inclusion or exclusion criteria. So I don't think there are for any of your groups, but perhaps if you wanted someone, you wanted to look at just Instagram users, right? And so you put the study out saying, only take this study if you're a current Instagram user. That would be considered an exclude or an inclusion criteria, and everyone who doesn't use Instagram, they're excluded from the survey. So most of you probably would have a sentence or two saying like, oh, there were no inclusion or exclusion criteria, unless you put like an age limit. I know at least one group has an age limit where they say they don't want anyone above the age of 30. So that would be an exclusion criteria. One of the things I highly suggest is looking at the sample papers on eCampus. There's 2 sample papers and they just take a look at their methods section. We'll take a look at their entire paper, but I suggest looking at their methods section and seeing what information they put in and how did they structure it. It'll give you some good ideas. So first in this methods section, we have the participants paragraph. This really should just be one paragraph. I'm assuming probably, ranging anywhere from 5 to 10 sentences. Next up, we have the material section, which should be a little bit larger. So this is where you talk about what did you use in your study. So any non-trivial material that is needed to conduct your study should be discussed. So if you're having, so this is really where you kind of talk about, some of the instructions maybe that you gave. I think it really depends on your group. So I'm just looking at what groups did. Okay, so I don't know. Okay, so this doesn't pertain, but in my other section, some of them were asked to find music that is calming or relaxing. That could be something you could talk about here. But really, the chunk or a big chunk of the material section should be talking about your independent variable and your dependent variable. So you really need to, let me move that out of the way. You really need to talk about, how did you manipulate your IV? What went into it? What is your IV? What is your DV? Your DV should look relatively similar to, your DV paragraph should look kind of similar to a paragraph you would have in Psych 203. Remember, all of you used some kind of validated scale, or you came up with your own questions for your dependent variable, if I remember correctly. So you can kind of talk about similar, how are you measuring your dependent variable? First off, what is your dependent variable? How are you measuring it? Are you going to sum up your scores, right? Some of you are summing, some of you are looking at an average score. Some of you are looking at a change score where you assess it pre and post. Now you'll talk a little bit more about this pre and post idea in the design and procedure where you will actually mention, oh, hey, we measured it at the beginning and we also measured it at the end. But here is where you can talk about, how you measured your DV. How did you manipulate your IV, right? Every one of you should have 2 groups in your IV. Well, what does each group look like? How did you manipulate your IV? So this is where you can go ahead and talk about that. Next up, you should mention that this research was conducted in a Qualtrics survey. This can just be like one sentence, right? You just need to mention that participants were instructed to take a Qualtrics survey, and just make sure you cite Qualtrics accordingly. And there's a link on this PowerPoint, which will be uploaded to eCampus, that it tells you how to cite Qualtrics. So material section, pretty straightforward. Just talk about your IV, talk about your DV, talk about anything else, which I don't think groups really should have much else. But if there is, you can talk about it here. All right, design and procedure. So this is really where you talk about how the study, like what a participant kind of saw as they went through the study. So first off, you need to mention, was it a between or was it a within? Make sure you remember or you look through and was yours a between and was yours a within? And if so, why was it a between and why was it a within? Additionally, how did you conduct the study? So in general, you're going to want to describe all the steps that a participant would experience from beginning to end. Now, and it says here that you want to include instructions, the experimental procedures, any debriefing that occurs. There's some things that you want to be specific about, and there's other things that you don't need to be as specific about, right? You don't need to, in your paragraph, have the exact instructions that you provided, right? You don't need to have it word for word, but you can say, if participants were instructed to read a vignette, you can just say, participants were instructed to read a vignette, and that they would be answering questions afterwards. You don't have to say, you don't have to copy and paste the exact question that you told, or the exact instructions that you told participants. Just kind of sum it up. Additionally, I should go back to, let me go back to the materials. I should mention that you don't need to copy and paste your vignette, or your exact materials within your paper, right? This will go in the abstract. This will go in the appendices at the end, where you can actually paste your vignette or you can paste your materials. But all you need to do is refer to them and kind of explain what your materials are, right? If you have a vignette describing having a bad day, don't give me the paragraph that you gave that's in the vignette. Just say, oh, hey, it's a vignette which consists of a paragraph about having a really bad day, and maybe give me one or two examples, 2 or 3 examples of what makes it a bad day. Similar to the procedure, you don't need to give the exact instructions, but just give a general walkthrough that if I was another researcher, I would be able to replicate your study. And remember, refer to the appendices. If you're gonna talk about, then they were instructed to do the helping attitude scale. Make sure you refer to that, make sure you have it in the appendices and you refer to that. All right. Does anyone have any questions so far about participants, materials, and design and procedure? Lengthwise, because I know some people have asked me questions over email about length. It's really going to vary from group to group because each experiment is different. But rough rule, and I would suggest looking at the sample papers to get a better idea about this. But for participants, we're probably looking at 1 paragraph. For materials, at a minimum, there should be 2. So there should definitely be 1 paragraph about your independent variable and 1 paragraph about your dependent variable. You may need 3 paragraphs for some other reason. Probably not, but let's just say at a minimum, there should be 2, 1 about your IV and 1 about your DV. And for design and procedure, this might just be 1 large paragraph just pitching what participants have to do. It might be 2 if you want to break it up. Once again, no hard set rule, but just some general guidelines. All right, so yeah, so once again, if you do any pilot study testing, throw it in the materials section with your IV. All right, did anyone have any questions that arose after I left their breakout rooms regarding the designing and procedure, or any popped up about the materials or participants? All right, yeah, not seeing any. Pretty straightforward, hopefully. Go check out the sample papers if you have any questions. If that doesn't answer your question, go ahead and throw me an email. Yeah, so the last paragraph is the data analysis paragraph. And this one should be pretty standard. We're expecting probably 3 to 5 sentences, maybe, shouldn't be that big. Talk about what descriptive statistics that you're going to run, and in which variable. So remember, these descriptive statistics, what are they? Can someone tell me what is an example of a descriptive statistic?
Gender or age?
What about gender and age?
How they affect the dependent variable?
So nope, that wouldn't be descriptive. That would be like an inferential. Yeah. So Terry in the chat said mean. So descriptive statistics are simply just describing something, right? What is the mean? What is the standard deviation? You're just giving these base level, here is a snapshot of what our data looks like, right? How many participants did we have? How many were male? How many were female? What was the age? What was the age range? What was the mean and standard deviation of that age? How many reported as being white? How many reported as being, some other ethnicity? This is where, you can talk about, we're going to run descriptive statistics on X, Y, and Z variables. If you as a group are doing a different score, so this has a couple different terms to it, but like a change score, different score. Essentially, if you have a pre-test, post-test, right, where you assess, I'm going to say emotions, right? Let's just pick emotion, sadness. If you assess sadness before your vignette and then assess sadness after your vignette, and you want to see, does your manipulation of your IV change emotions, right? And you have a change score, talk about that, talk about how the variable was created. So, maybe you did a pre-test and a post-test, and you're going to subtract one from the other. Then you should identify the inferential test. So Dr. Tenenholtz talked about ANOVAs, right? So, but I don't think, no group is probably going to be running an ANOVA because you only have 2 levels of your independent variable. So all of you are going to be stuck with the type of t-test. So we have 2 types of t-test, right? So we have the dependent samples t-test and the independent samples t-test. Go back in your notes, try and think about which one that you're going to be using. And then every paragraph should have a sentence that looks somewhat similar down to this one below. An independent samples t-test, or if you're going to be running a dependent samples t-test, you would say that, was used to analyze the impact of your independent variable. So right here, it looks like it's price on your dependent variable, on this ratings of chocolate quality. And all of you should have, in the parentheses here, we see $1 and $3. So, I'm assuming that this study is referring to, we give the same piece of chocolate, and one we say, oh, it's $1, another one we say $3, and we see how well or how people respond to how much they like the chocolate. So we have our 2 levels of the independent variable, which are $1 and $3. Make sure that you have your own breakdown of your independent variable in this parentheses right here, and keep it short and succinct. If you can try to get it under 5 words, try to get each condition under 5 words. Really break down what you are assessing. If you have a happy condition and a sad condition, right there, happy, sad. So really break it down. This should, in the parentheses right here, where you're talking about the breakdown of your 2 levels of your IV, it should not be, a sentence each. It really should be a couple words. What else goes into data analysis? Oh, you also should have a sentence, something along the lines of, data analysis was performed using SPSS, student version, whatever. Talk about your descriptive stats, talk about your inferential test, which is your t-test. Yeah, and that should pretty much be it for the data analysis section. Go take a look at the sample paper, look at their data analysis, see if there's anything I missed. I don't think there is. Well, yeah, so, right here. So maybe as a group, you've come up with some other ideas that you want to look at within your own data. Several groups included other questions. So, how are you going to analyze it? Do you maybe want to run a correlation on age and your outcome variable to see if there's any difference? Maybe you want to look at, I don't know, ethnicity. And so if you're asking about ethnicity and you think that could influence your outcome, maybe you could run an ANOVA. So let's go back to so maybe you want to run an ANOVA and see if, I'm going to back up right here and probably say you won't have enough data to run an ANOVA on this, because remember from Dr. Tenenholtz, an ANOVA is kind of like a t-test, but instead of just 2 groups, you have 3 groups. So if we're thinking about ethnicity, so most likely we have, white, black, and, other, maybe let's say Hispanic. Probably not going to have enough participants to run an ANOVA on that. So I'm just going to back off on that one. But maybe you want to run a correlation on age and something, or level of education and your outcome, if you think that it's going to matter. if you don't think it's going to matter, don't throw it in your paper just because you're going to throw it in. Because if you say we're going to run a correlation on age and this, one of my comments is going to be, well, why? Do you have anything in your introduction stating that age may matter at all? Or that age differences were found in prior research. So don't throw in we're going to do this analysis just because. I'm going to ask you to justify it. So if you have a justification, throw it in. Let's see, some more things that go in it. You got to state your alpha level, so it should be 0.05 for everyone. And if there's any participants excluded from your analysis. So you probably, you might be able to have like a shell of a sentence for the exclusion. But if you keep it out in your methods draft, I won't take off points for it. Because you can add that sentence in about exclusions afterwards when you start cleaning the data. One thing I will say here, that talking about excluding participants. So all groups are probably going to have a few participants that start the survey and never finish. Even though we're not going to be using their data, they're not considered being excluded from the analyses because they never finished the study. Participants excluded from the analyses are only participants who completed the study, but were not using their data for some other reason. So potentially, I don't know, if you think your study should take 2 to 3 minutes, right? And you see a participant has a completion time of 30 seconds. That's probably not a participant who paid attention to your instructions, right? So maybe you might want to have a cutoff of, you look at the average time and you say anyone under 2 standard deviations, and this is something that we can work on as a group in our group meeting, but maybe someone who's 2 standard deviations below the average completion time, maybe we'll throw out their data. And there shouldn't be many of them, but that would be something you could throw in here for excluding from analyses. I don't think anyone had validity check questions. So if you remember last semester, validity check questions are questions that we throw in there to make sure participants are paying attention. I don't think any group had that, but that could be another one that throw in here for exclusion, or a criteria for exclusion, having to pass the validity check. So once again, take a check at the sample papers. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. All right, so that brings us to assignment number 8, which is, probably have guessed it, writing the methods draft. I'm going to breeze through this. Write a draft in your methods section. Make sure the participants, materials, design, procedure, data analysis sections are all included. Check out eCampus for more instructions on, what goes into, what we want to see. Make sure it's your individual work. So do not plagiarize. Don't copy directly off your project proposal. Put it in your own words. This is due next Thursday. Some notes, write in past tense throughout. So remember, we're always writing in past tense. If a sentence starts with a number, write it out. So if you're going to say, 70 or 100 participants participated in this study, make sure you write out that 100. You won't have any numbers, right? So especially the participants section is all about numbers, reporting the demographics, reporting these descriptive statistics. You won't have any numbers. So go ahead and just put XX or the pound sign, and you can fill it in later. Anyone have any questions or concerns about assignment number 8? All right. So let's go ahead and move on to this writing workshop. We're going to kind of quickly go through these. All of these are going to be grammar based. And I am not an English teacher, so a lot of the grammar stuff is kind of new to me. You kind of just know what the problem is after you've been writing so many papers. But if you're ever curious about the behind the scenes, reasoning for why these changes or why these are errors, this is always up on eCampus, and it's in its own folder as well, I think called like Writing Workshop. But anyways, just someone used either the raise hand feature or shout it out. Can someone tell me what the problem is with this sentence? So the sentence is, the data was analyzed using a Pearson correlation coefficient. Emma?
Is it because it's personifying the data, like who analyzed the data, not just that the data was analyzed?
Not necessarily. It would be that anthropomorphizing if you would say the data said this. The data doesn't. So that would be the personifying, the anthropomorphizing. So the problem with this one is the plurality of things. So right here, the data was analyzed. It should be were. So data is a plural word where datum is like a singular data point. So, excuse me. So phrases such as data is and data was incorrect. We want to say the data were analyzed. All right, next up. The significance of these findings are notable. Kylie?
Should it be is and not are?
Yep, good job. I would probably make that own mistake in my own writing. The significance of these findings is notable. The number of the subject, significance, determines the number of the verb, is and are. Significance should be is. Good job. All right, the participants were administered either 0, 75, or 150 milligrams of caffeine.
Should it be the I don't know. It should be was, right? Because it.
No, were's okay here. The word were is okay here. Julia?
Could you not say the word either because there's more than 3 options? Or there's more than 2 options?
Yep, perfect. So either or either is used to compare 2 items only. Since we have more than 2, we should either just restructure the sentence or just drop either. Good job. All right. Once participants practice deep breathing for 5 minutes, they take the working memory test. Keely?
Wouldn't it be took?
Go ahead, Zoe.
Sorry,
Is it Zoe or
wouldn't it
Zoe?
be? It's Zoe.
Zoe, okay, go ahead.
Wouldn't it be they took the working memory test since the first part is in the past tense?
Sure, yeah. So the problem is with tense. So we didn't change it to took. So you want to, since we're writing in past tense, right? Practice is in past tense. We want to change the rest of the sentence to be past tense. So always keep, one verb tense throughout the entire sentence, and honestly throughout your entire paper. And in most cases, we're writing in past tense. So always keep it in past tense. So we've changed it to completed. But there's other words that you can, past tense words that you can change it to. The researchers concluded that sleep, and good job, by the way. The researchers concluded that sleep and stress were related because there was a strong positive correlation.
This could be one sentence, right? Because doesn't have to be a whole second sentence.
Yes, it's a sentence fragment. So because there was a strong positive correlation, that isn't a complete thought. So, and this is a common misconception that you can't start a sentence with the word because. In certain situations you can, like right here, we could say, because there was a strong positive correlation, the researchers concluded that sleep and stress were related. I'm not going to get into like including a noun and a verb, but just so you want to convey a complete thought. So, one of the things you could do is just make that into a comma, or you could restructure the entire sentence so that that last part is first. All right. The researchers found that women were under more stress than men. This difference was statistically significant. Julia?
Are those two different sentences that should be separated by like a period instead of the comma after man?
Yes, so this is a comma splice, otherwise known as a run-on sentence. This is something we see all the time in Psych 204, Psych 203 writing. Look it in your own work. A lot of the times I didn't comment on it in some of your earlier work, but I will start commenting on it now. Yeah, this is a comma splice / a run-on sentence. Yeah, just something to think about in your own work. If you find, that you have a comma in your sentence, read over the sentence, make sure that, it isn't a situation like this where it should be two sentences. Or a lot of the times there's randomly a comma thrown in some of your guys' sentences. Just every time there's a comma, check to see if it can be its own sentence or check to see if the comma doesn't even need to be there. The ratings of happiness were expected to significantly increase following the exercise program. This one's really nuanced. Anyone want to take a stab at this one? All right. So I'm not going to get into like a split infinitive. I honestly have no idea what that is. And I write papers. The problem here is the order of the words. So the rating of happiness were expected to increase significantly rather than significantly increase. This is really nuanced. I'm going to be 100% honest. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this. I probably won't catch something like this in your own paper. Don't worry too much about this one, but here it is. It's a split infinitive. Yeah, if you care enough, go back and check it. I'll try to catch this in your paper. I'm not going to take off points, but I'll try to catch it and correct it. Let's see some of the other changes here. To rapidly change should be to change rapidly. To not pass the test, not to pass the test. To strongly support should be to support strongly. It is what it is. Yeah, like I said, I'll try to catch them. No promises though that I'll catch it in your own work to try to help and correct it. All right, I think there's like one or two more. Actually, this is it. So the 150 milligram dose of caffeine increased heart rate significantly and produced feelings of nausea. It was observed in all participants. Anyone want to take a stab at this? Julia.
Should it say something like increased participants' heart rate significantly and produced feelings of nausea instead of like it was observed in all participants at the end? Because in the originally it doesn't say like who.
No, but I like where you're going with this. I'm going to ask you a question, and it might answer the question that I had. What was observed in all participants? Can you answer that for me, Julia?
Increased heart rate and feelings of nausea.
So that would be your assumption, right? But we're not 100% sure. Was it just feelings of nausea? Was it the increased heart rate? So you never want to start a sentence with it. Well, I'm going to back off that blanket rule. You most likely probably shouldn't start a sentence with it. We want to explain what it is. And I used to do this all the time. So it is obviously referring to something, right? Even if you only talked about one thing in the beginning. So even if we just said the caffeine increased heart rate significantly, it was observed in all participants. You still don't even want to say it then. You want to say, this increase in heart rate was observed in all participants. So blanket rule, never use it as a pronoun? Yeah. If you're using it as a pronoun and it's referring to something, just always explain what that something is. All right, like I said, I'll be able to catch some of these in your own writing. And when I say catch, it's not like I'm taking points off, just trying to become a better writer. But some of these I probably won't catch, and I apologize for that just because I make these mistakes myself. Yes, if anyone has any questions, I have office hours from right after this to 5 p.m. So if you have any questions about your introduction, please ask them then because I won't be able to answer it after 5 p.m. Yeah, if you have questions about your survey, I know someone did. I'll stay on after this class. Like I won't go to my office hours, just stay, don't leave, and you can ask me questions. But yeah, other than that, I will see you next week.